The Republic built the Venator to carry fighters, the Acclamator to land armies, the Arquitens to screen flanks, and the ARC-170 to operate deep behind enemy lines. Every single one designed as part of the same war machine, and we almost never got to see them fight together. That's not a complaint, it's a question worth answering. What did that machine look like when it ran at full strength? The Republic Navy had 3 documented operational objectives: defend the core worlds, maintain security for supply lines, deploy and extract the Grand Army of the Republic. Those aren't 3 separate missions, they're 3 layers of the same operation, and the fleet was engineered to execute all 3 simultaneously. No single official sourcebook labels this a combined arms doctrine. That framing is an analytical reconstruction, but the architecture is there in the ships themselves. A carrier destroyer that commands local space, a light cruiser that screens its flanks, a heavy assault ship that bridges orbit to ground, and a starfighter wing divided into 3 distinct operational tiers. Read them together, and you get something that looks less like a collection of ships and more like a deliberate system. Everything orbits the Venator. At approximately 1,137 meters long, the Venator-class Star Destroyer was the flagship of the Republic Starfleet, the command node around which every other asset organized. Kuat Drive Yards built it as a hybrid, part line battleship, part fleet carrier. 8 heavy dual turbo-laser turrets for direct ship-to-ship engagement, 52 point defense laser cannons to protect its own fighter operations, 4 proton torpedo launchers, and 6 tractor beam projectors to control the space around it. Those 52 point defense cannons are the tell. That armament profile wasn't built for slugging matches against enemy capital ships. It was built to keep fighters alive while they operated. The Venator doesn't win engagements by outgunning the enemy. It wins by controlling the volume of space around it, which is a fundamentally different design philosophy than its separatist counterpart, the Providence-class. The Providence was more heavily geared toward anti-capital ship warfare and could operate effectively alone. The Venator was built to be the center of something larger. The architecture proves the intent. 2 separate bridges, one handling starfighter operations, one controlling helm functions and maneuvering. A dorsal flight deck running the ship's centerline, with armored blast doors opening along the bow. A second ventral hangar bay underneath. The Venator could run launch and recovery cycles simultaneously from different bays, keeping fighter operations continuous rather than intermittent. Nobody builds 2 command centers unless they expect to run 2 concurrent operations at once. The Republic built 1 bridge to fight the capital ship battle, and 1 bridge to fight the air war inside that battle. In Legends-era specifications, a Venator at full configuration carried 420 starfighters, 192 V-19 Torrents, or V-wings for fleet defense, 192 Eta-2 interceptors for fast pursuit, and at least 36 ARC-170s for deep strike. Cannon sources put many operational loadouts considerably lower. The ships weren't always sailing at maximum capacity, and most combat deployments shown on screen featured a fraction of the full complement. But the hangar infrastructure existed. The Venator also carried 40 LAAT gunships and 24 ATTE walkers, which means it wasn't purely a space warfare platform. It was a ground assault staging base simultaneously. 7,000 crew to operate it. The Acclamator ran on 700. The Venator needed that manpower because it was running multiple concurrent operations: fighter launch cycles, capital ship weapons coordination, fleet command communications, and ground asset management, all at the same moment. In tactical doctrine, individual Venators divided roles, one hanging back to coordinate starfighter assaults from its port-side flight bridge, while another pressed forward to directly engage enemy destroyers. 3 working in tandem during the Battle of Coruscant managed to badly damage Grievous's Providence-class flagship, the Invisible Hand. At the largest scale, Coruscant itself, reportedly upwards of 1,000 Venators protected the capital simultaneously. The ship scaled from single task force command node to system-wide fleet coordination. The Venator's fighter wing wasn't a large collection of aircraft. It was a combined arms operation in miniature, organized by role. The V-19 Torrent sat at the bottom of the range scale. Carrier-dependent, no hyperdrive, built for close-in fleet defense and space superiority within the task force perimeter. Fast and sturdy. Its job was intercepting whatever came at the Venator and its escorts. The Eta-2 Actis interceptor had no onboard hyperdrive at all. It required an external hyperspace transport ring to move between systems. Without the ring, it went nowhere. In exchange, the Eta-2 gave up shields on its standard configuration and minimized its armament. Maximum speed and maneuverability inside a defined engagement space. Primarily assigned to Jedi pilots in canonical deployments, the Eta-2 was lethal, short-ranged, and completely dependent on the carrier to get it to the fight. Then there's the ARC-170, and it's a different category entirely. Every other fighter in that wing needed the Venator to exist. The ARC-170 didn't. The aggressive reconnaissance 170 carried a Class 1.5 hyperdrive, confirmed in both canon and Legends sources. 5 days of consumables, a crew of 3, a pilot, a forward gunner in the co-pilot position, operating the wing-mounted laser cannons and proton torpedoes, and a tail gunner, running rear-facing cannons to cover approaches from behind. Plus an astromech droid, handling navigation and systems management. That crew configuration is itself a design argument. A single pilot can't sustain situational awareness, maintain navigation, manage ordnance, and cover rear threats simultaneously on a multi-day independent sortie. The ARC-170's 3-person crew solved that problem. The V-19 and the Eta-2 were day fighters tied to their carrier. The ARC-170 was a patrol aircraft, a strike platform, and a reconnaissance asset that could operate on its own timeline for nearly a week without returning to base. In Legends, ARC-170s were regularly sent on dangerous scout missions and raids deep in enemy territory, operating ahead of or entirely separate from the main fleet. They functioned as heavy strike elements in coordinated operations, not as fleet defenders. Proton torpedoes for anti-capital ship work, heavy laser cannons for fighter combat, concussion missiles in some configurations for anti-fighter work. The designation aggressive reconnaissance is accurate. The ship was designed to go somewhere dangerous, find something important, and hit it before coming back. The hyperdrive is the payload that makes all of this possible. Without it, the ARC-170 is just a well-armed heavy fighter. With it, the ARC-170 becomes the task force's long reach, the asset that operates in a star system the Venator hasn't entered yet, completing a mission while the rest of the fleet is still assembling at the jump point. The Venator's 36 ARC-170s extended the task force's effective operational radius from a few thousand kilometers to an entire theater. Now the layer that most discussions leave out. The Venator holds space. The Acclamator carries the army. Both of those ships are large, relatively slow, and extremely valuable, and both have moments of operational vulnerability. During a Venator's active fighter launch cycle, or during an Acclamator's atmospheric descent, those ships can't concentrate full defensive attention on their flanks. Smaller, faster Separatist vessels could exploit that window. The Arquitens-class light cruiser is the answer to that problem. At 325 meters, the Arquitens was roughly a quarter the Venator's length. Kuat drive yards built it with 4 turret-mounted light turbo-laser batteries and 4 heavy quad-laser cannon batteries, an armament profile weighted toward anti-fighter and anti-light ship work, rather than capital ship duels. 3 powerful engines gave it speed and maneuverability the larger vessels couldn't match. Across documented Clone Wars engagements, the Arquitens appears consistently in screening and escort functions. The ship wasn't a solo combatant. It was designed to operate in pairs or small groups, covering the flanks and rear of larger vessels focused elsewhere. The Arquitens is what keeps an Acclamator alive during the descent window, when the Venator is managing fighter ops and can't cover everything. Once the Venator owns local space and the Arquitens secures the flanks, the Acclamator's phase begins. The Acclamator-class transgalactic military assault ship was 752 meters long and carried 16,000 clone troopers, a full legion and its support personnel. 80 LAAT gunships, approximately 66 of the infantry variant, and 14 vehicle carriers, were stored on an overhead circulating rail in the upper hangar. 84 armored vehicles occupied the lower decks. The entire complement could be offloaded through a large ramp system once the ship set down. And the Acclamator did set down, directly, on the surface. That distinction carries the entire doctrinal argument for this layer. Unlike later Imperial Star Destroyers, which relied on separate landing craft to move troops from orbit to ground, the Acclamator was built to bring the army all the way down itself, capable of water landings, demonstrated at Mon Calamari, capable of rough terrain, demonstrated repeatedly across the Clone Wars. The Acclamator was its own landing craft, at a scale that no dedicated shuttle could match. One ship, 16,000 soldiers, 80 gunships, 80-plus armored vehicles, deployable in a single landing operation. Acclamators appeared on the battlefield at First Geonosis. 9 were visible in orbit simultaneously at the Second Battle of Geonosis, alongside 6 Venators, one of the only documented instances in the Clone Wars where both ship types appeared in the same engagement. The LAAT/I gunships launched from the upper hangar first, each carrying 30 clone troopers, hitting the ground in waves while the ship was still descending, providing close air support as the ramps came down and the ATTE walkers rolled out. The Acclamator's own armament, 12 quad turbo laser turrets rated at 200 gigatons per shot, handled any remaining threats during the approach phase. At First Geonosis, those turrets knocked out Geonosian launch facilities on the way in. The ship was a warship and a troop transport, and a forward operating base, all in the same hull. On the ground, the operation continued as its own combined arms sequence. ARC troopers, the Grand Army's elite direct action units trained for deep penetration and objective seizure, moved ahead of the main line. The surface-side equivalent of what the ARC-170 did in space. Advanced Recon Force Scouts provided pathfinding and intelligence. Standard clone infantry advanced with ATTE Walker fire support, the Walkers' elevated position giving their gunners overlapping fields of fire that dismounted infantry couldn't replicate. LAAT/I gunships maintained close air support continuously overhead, transitioning from insertion platforms to fire support assets within minutes of landing. The orbital Acclamator sat above the entire ground engagement, providing a command and logistics platform simultaneously. Jedi generals on the surface, coordinating with assigned Republic Navy officers like Admiral Wolf Yularen above, connected the ground battle to the fleet in orbit. Space and surface weren't separate engagements. They were the same engagement operating on 2 levels simultaneously. Run the full sequence and the picture becomes clear. The task force drops out of hyperspace. Venators establish the engagement perimeter, launching fighter wings as they decelerate. V-19 Torrents establishing a close-in defense screen. Eta-2 interceptors pushing forward to contest local space. The ARC-170s may already be gone, having jumped ahead days earlier to scout enemy dispositions and neutralize threats before the main fleet arrived. Arquitens-class cruisers take station on the Venator's flanks and on the Acclamator's approach corridors, covering the vectors the larger ships can't protect while executing primary missions. Once space superiority is established, the Acclamators begin atmospheric entry. Not after the space battle ends, during it, because the doctrine was built on the assumption that the Venators, their fighter wings, and the Arquitens screen would maintain adequate control of local space during the insertion window. That's the entire point of the layered system. The Acclamator descends into space that has been pre-cleared by assets that were specifically designed to clear it. First gunship waves deploy before the Acclamator touches down. Walkers roll out as the ramps come down. ARC troopers are already at the objective. The LAAT/I shifts from insertion to fire support. The operation transitions from naval to ground in real time, with the same chain of command managing both. That's the machine. Hyperspace reversion to surface control, every layer activating in sequence, every asset supporting the one beside it. We were never shown all of it at once. The Clone Wars covered 7 seasons across roughly 3 years of war. In that span, space and ground components of Republic operations were almost always depicted separately. The Battle of Ryloth across Season 1 ran 3 episodes, one for the space engagement, one for ground infiltration, one for surface liberation. Sequential, not simultaneous. The Battle of Umbara in Season 4 ran 4 episodes of exceptional ground combat, with the Venators appearing only as static orbital objects, contributing nothing visible to the tactical situation below. The Battle of Coruscant in Revenge of the Sith showed the Republic fleet at its maximum scale, the space battle enormous and spectacular, with no ground component, no Acclamators landing troops, no orbital-to-ground sequence. The Second Battle of Geonosis came closest. 9 Acclamators and 6 Venators in orbit simultaneously, with landing at Point Rain, showing the ground assault that followed. But the Arquitens screening layer wasn't depicted. The ARC-170 deep strike element wasn't shown. The space and ground phases weren't simultaneous. The space component was resolved before the ground assault became the focus. The full 420 fighter launch capacity of a Venator was never shown. The 3-tier wing, fleet defense, intercept, deep strike, was never depicted operating as a unified system. There is no single episode, no single battle in the canonical record where you can watch the Venator running its wings, the Arquitens covering the flanks, and the Acclamator descending with its walkers as a coherent, simultaneous, combined operation. The doctrine existed in the ships. The evidence for it's in the specifications, the deployment patterns, the 3 stated Navy objectives, the documented task force compositions. Jason Fry and Paul Urquhart's Essential Guide to Warfare is 246 pages of Republic military history, confirming the fleet operated at multiple simultaneous levels. What the screen gave us were isolated pieces, the space part or the ground part or the fighter part, each separated by episode format and production constraints. The complete picture was always on the drawing board. The ships themselves were the argument for it. We were shown enough pieces to know exactly what the full picture looked like, which makes assembling it now feel less like speculation and more like a debt being paid. So, what does your ideal Republic task force look like for a contested system? How many Venators? How many Arquitens on the flanks? How many Acclamators in the assault wave? Drop it in the comments. That's a debate worth having. And if you want to go deeper on either end of this machine, the ARC-170 and the Venator both have more to say than a combined arms overview can fit. Those are the next chapters. Subscribe and we'll get there.